Yeah.
Yes, welcome. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16. And no, this ain't no album, this ain't no game. I'm joined by a very, very special guest. It's almost like distant fam. And this is the author. We're talking about Trap. And who better to have than the author of the book itself, Trap History. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Who you be, bro?
Yes, sir. A.R. Shaw, man, author Trap History. First book that details the history of trap music. Born and raised in Atlanta. Author, journalist, just a lover of hip hop music. Lover of Black culture, man. So thanks again for having me on this show, man. I'm definitely excited about it.
Gotcha. And he's being humble. Y'all can Google this man. You'll see him a part of your favorite publications and media outlets interviewing your favorite folks. So yeah, man, I got so many questions to ask you in preparation when I finally release my Rap Ruler book. But we'll talk offline about that. Today, we're going over the album that a lot of people credit as starting the term and starting the genre. We're talking about none other than the album turning 20 years old today, Trap Music by T.I. So all the folk out there be in the comments dropping very, very humorous feedback on how I wear my many hats. I had to break out the beanie tilted hard to the side since we talk about a T.I. album. Little background on this album, released on August 19th, 2003. On Atlantic Records and Grand Hustle Records through a split deal. This is when joint ventures and split deals were all the rage. This is T.I.'s sophomore album. And if y'all haven't already, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. And we'll just jump into it with no further ado. This is category 1, where we go over the album, the product itself. And the first dimension we talk about in category 1 is dimension 1, the quality of the production. AR, who we all got behind the boards on this album?
DJ Toomp, West Side legend, West Side of Atlanta legend. Had started with MC Shy D in the 80s. Had did some tracks for Luke, and so DJ Toomp is really the architect behind the album Trap Music. There's several other producers who come in and lend some production. David Banner and Kanye West, they did some tracks, and also Jazzy Faye. But for the most part, this is an album crafted by DJ Toomp, and he gives you that down south Atlanta feel with this album.
You know what? I thought that too until I looked in the notes and I forgot that this album is kind of mostly split between Toomp and an unknown producer who T.I. met by way of Tiny, because he had been down with Tiny since the Escape days, and his name is Sanchez Holmes. He don't even have a production name. And he did at least 4 tracks on the album. I think Toomp did 4, and then the rest is split between the people that you named. Jazzy Faye, Kanye does 2. T.I. is credited as producing a track and half a track. So he produces half of the title track. They said he laid the boards on. They said he's kind of a beast in his own right with the drum programming. Nick Fury, who was the same dude who produced Game Over for Lil Flip, he produced I Still Love You. And he said when he made the beat, he was going through something with his baby moms and his, the mother of his daughter. So he was blown away that T.I. made a song talking about baby mama issues and parenthood. And he said they almost forgot to give him credit. They didn't know he made the beat, so they just happened to go past the studio, and he's like, that's my beat. And then you have one other producer behind I Can't Quit, which is Benny Tillman and Carlos Thornton on I Can't Quit, which you could tell kind of has an organic kind of live bass feel, which rolls right along with a lot of the production on the album, because you're going to hear a lot of guitar licks, wah-wah, live bass. And then what Toomp brought out was a signature sound, but he really, really got to hone it in on this album. Big horns, big 808 drums. He said he comes from that Miami bass background. So the way he constructed his 808s just hit real different when you pair them up against these grandiose horns or these soul samples. Even something as simple as Be Easy. Be Easy is just a straight piano loop from an Al Wilson song. But because he's adding those hard horns, those, you know, little horn hits every now and then, and the bass line. I thought it's interesting how you hear T.I. be able to flex over these different kinds of beats. They also didn't use a lot of samples, so I gotta give this album props for not having a lot of samples.
Yeah.
A lot of original production on here. I think Jazzy Faye gave him a very Jazzy Faye beat for that era. Yeah, that's when it was like a Atlanta prerequisite to have at least one Jazzy Faye track.
Yeah. Jazzy got him on the radio.
We'd be remiss not to talk about how getting two Kanye beats at this time, they were kind of parallel in their careers. Kanye, this is right before he drops College Dropout, so he's still cutting his chops as a producer that people know. Like, they know his name now, and T.I. is a name that people know but not ringing bells like that. So they both kind of ascended at the same time. And so I wonder, you know, what those conversations were like. Like, they didn't use either song for a radio single, and I think Wanna Be Your Man, or Let Me Tell You Something, Let Me Tell You Something, sampling the Roger Troutman, I Wanna Be Your Man, that had radio written all over it, and it never got used.
It did. I think, and I you know, what was interesting about the two Kanye tracks was, you know, particularly in Atlanta, although Let Me Tell You Something was, you know, you're right, it was probably tailor-made for radio, but in Atlanta, Doing My Job kind of resonated more, because it was like a 70s soul sample, and he's basically talking about trapping. And so, yeah, that soul sample from Kanye, it actually, like I say, it was something that, although it didn't get national radio play, down here in Atlanta, you would hear that song just because Kanye was on it. And Kanye, at the time, Kanye was actually, he was ascending himself and becoming his own major figure within Rockefeller, at the time, Rockefeller Records. And so they will play that song here because of that connection with Kanye.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it goes back to what I was saying about the impressiveness of hearing the range of beats that T.I. would rap, which was not common for the Atlanta sound at the time, or Southern rap in general. So there's like a good 4 beats on there that any other rapper from any other region would have rapped over. I remember first hearing this album, we going back to the LimeWire and BearShare days. So I was like searching the internet, and I'm like, let me give it let me see. But it's back when you only would get a snippet of a song, because they psych you out, make you think you downloading the full MP3. Now, I heard snippets of I Still Love You, heard snippets of I'm Just Doing My Job. And then, and I'm like, oh, these sound like some state property would rap over right now, because the soul sample sound was so prominent back then. You had Just Blaze, you had Kanye who started it, but then you had Dipset's crew, the heat makers that were doing it, and then so many copycat producers, because that was the trend. If Crunk was one thing that Lil Jon had going as a trend, up north, you know, the soul sample. So T.I. is able to do that, and then you hear the album and you got tracks like No More Talk with the Gary Wright sample, and that sounds like something the East Coast rapper, up north rapper would have been on. So I think he's very conscious minded about beat selection, having, you know, diversity to show his range. No way I can't mention Rubber Band Man. You brought it up earlier. David Banner said that T.I. worked out a price, so this is, you know, why I was saying I wonder what the conversations with Kanye was at that time, because Kanye wasn't Kanye yet, but Kanye, we've learned, you know, if you see things like the Kanye documentary, his personality's kind of always been his personality, right? The ego's always been there. And I wonder, you know, how that went. But with David Banner, he was like, T.I. was like, look, I take care of everybody around me, so if you work something out, I'll make it worth your while. And that wound up being the 3rd single, and David Banner said that's the song out of all his production leading up to that point that made him an in-demand producer that raised, you know, he said his price went up. Yesterday's price, it's not today's price. And he said T.I. was the first rap song that allowed him to keep the David Banner tag in the beginning, and that just made. And if you remember the video, David Banner's, you know, playing on the keyboard on the porch.
Yep.
Yeah, man, it was a big deal. They said it lightened up the field. They said he just introduced something new, a different kind of bouncy sound. It didn't last before a minute. It was good for him. It didn't create a wave. But I do remember, you know, I remember living in Atlanta in 2005, and I was there for the rise of Jeezy, And I remember like Jeezy's last single from his Thug Motivation 101 was the My Hood. And I'm like, yo, this sounds just like Rubber Band Man. Have you heard that in Atlanta? Have you heard people compare those two beats?
You know, I never, you know, I haven't, but I mean, when I think about it, there is similarities. Yeah.
The whole melody that Yeah. I was like, damn, that's too soon. It's only 1 year later, man. But what would you give the production on this album on a scale from 1 to 5? 5 being the highest.
I'm gonna say a 4.5, only because, going back to your point, if we look at what Atlanta was and what Atlanta was becoming at that time, right? Like we're in the middle of crunk, like crunk, and then like kind of snap. It's almost like this. It's kind of like they kind of like coincide with each other. The crunk movement and the snap movement are almost like hand in hand down here. And snap was just like kind of like in the clubs, starting to kind of build a buzz, and you know, it wasn't really prominent yet, but in the clubs, people were like playing this snap music. And so you're right, like T.I. didn't really gravitate towards either one, and he kind of used that same formula, similar to the I'm Serious album, but this one is a little bit more street than I'm Serious. Yeah, from a production standpoint, like I say, 4. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 because, you know, T.I.P definitely did his thing. Him having the Kanye tracks, you know, the Jazzy Faye tracks, is like you get different elements of Atlanta, but also just what hip hop was at that time. Like you say, you know, those are beats that a New York artist could have rapped. You could hear a Dipset or Cameron rapping over I'm doing my job. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a beat that they would have easily like flowed over, and T.I. was able to do something with it, and which was something that wasn't really prevalent in Southern hip hop at the time, because even like these are like Outkast. 2003 is like Outkast, I guess. Speaker Box, Love Below era, and they weren't really like Outkast was just doing Outkast. They weren't really. They had their own instrumentation. They didn't really have any type of. They were like genreless. Like they didn't fall into any category. So T.I. being able to kind of, I guess, have music that kind of resonates with everybody. So I give it a 4.5.
All right, we go into dimension 2, the cohesiveness of the album. So we talked about this wide range of diversity of producers, Sanchez Holmes, T.I.P really crafting this. And, you know, props again to T.I. for producing 2 tracks. It didn't sound like the kind of production that when a rapper tries to produce, you could tell that they need some more work. I remember Eminem's first beats feeling like that. Like,
yeah, they were kind of all I remember when Eminem first began producing. You knew it was Eminem track because it had that same little soft, like it was just a weird type of pace to it. It had the same feel to it. Like he couldn't really. It was, I don't know, very like.
They were hollow.
Slow, and I'm looking for the right word for it. Just kind of dry. That's another.
Those beats were dry, hollow. Yeah. And to this day, he'll tell you he got the snare wrong on Cleaning Out My Closet. But anyway, so yeah, we talked about this range and this diversity of the production. But how does the album flow to you? Do you feel like the songs go together to tell a story just sonically, and one song matches up? I always consider this a question of the sequencing, how the executive producer and the artist come together on figuring out which tracks should follow which.
Yeah, so the album Feel of Trap Music, it feels like a first album, right? If you look at the second song, I think I Can't Quit, it's basically like, you know, because he had been dropped from the face. He had been dropped, and a lot of people had written him off and thought that he was just, you know, he was just gonna be one of those one and done artists. But I Can't Quit was like, yo, I can't stop. And so the second song is like, yo, like he's like really letting people know that this is not the end. And then it's just like it flows, and it you know, it goes into like, you know, his personal story, goes into like, you know, party, goes into women, but it also delves deeper into like trap music and what the trap means to Atlanta. So it's like, you know, from a flow standpoint, it's like, you know, it was definitely like the sequencing of the songs were definitely it was something that you could actually it told a story in a sense, right? And so I think the sequences of the album is definitely on point.
Yeah, I'm always impressed when rappers say, or artists in general say that they make songs, they make a billion songs and have to choose the best to make the album. Because I'm like, you would think that these songs that were made were the only songs that were made because they were chosen pretty intentionally. You could tell just by how they're lined up. There's still some of the old school formula that's being followed here. That's kind of what he does, right? He gives you the title track, jumps into I Can't Quit, like you said, which is the answering, what happened and how he's coming back with a vengeance. And then Be Easy, which just happens to be a single, but it's another form of braggadocio, just with a different feel. So you're getting different tones of braggadocio. It's just really, something to marvel at, because not a lot of rappers could do that. Most rappers are stuck in one mode of braggadocio. Like, I rap this way about how nice I am every song and how whack you are every song, but it's just a different feel. It's more lighthearted. And so you get those different tones of braggadocio before he goes into the I'm just doing my job, which sonically takes you somewhere else too. So, I mean, you can't help but believe that this was intentional how they set things up. Middle of the album, they put all three of the major singles back to back, which I always find interesting when rap albums or any album does that. Because I'm like, well, you run the risk of people being like, I'm out after this. These are the songs I know, and then I'm done. But like you said, there were other songs on there that had single quality. Look What I Got comes later in the album. But then there's a part at the end of Be Better Than Me where he's like, hey, shawty, we get killed in my hood every day. And then it goes right into Long Live the Game, which is his song about getting killed in his hood, right? I'm like, oh yeah, those types of things. From an artist standpoint, you could tell they were intentional. But I thought also beat-wise, they just really did a good job putting the lighter beats right after the darker songs, right after the soul samples. You get a clunk or, more turned up beat. And that's what you want from an album. You want to not have these valleys and hills. You want to just have on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, what would you give the cohesiveness of this album?
It's a 5. I think what artists, I say particularly in the 90s, did better, even so more so than the 80s. And right now, as an artist in the 90s, they basically they knew how to grab you in the beginning, kind of like, let you down a little bit and get you back excited in the end. So it was like I said, it does a great job of like giving you different range of emotions with the music, where you're not just like stuck on this one plane. It's like, okay, he's taking you to different places.
All right, so we go to dimension 3, the intentional mood and tone of the album. So the feel of it, right? And this is not so much what mood we get from it or what mood we're in when we listen to it. It's what you think the overall tone that T.I. was trying to convey on this album, and how good of a job did he do executing it.
This is almost like a revenge album. It's kind of like that boxer in the 12th round, where it's like, I'm coming out swinging, I'm trying to get a knockout, whatever happens. And it's like, but also just giving people another aspect of Atlanta. I think for the most part, I think you look at 2003. Again, it's just Atlanta is like in this almost like this infant stage of becoming what it is today. As one of the prominent cities in hip hop, where it's like, we had the Outkast Dungeon Family movement, you had the Lil Jon Crunk movement, Snap is on its way, but in this, like, there's another aspect of Atlanta that's not really being like I guess highlighted. And it's like, you did have artists such as, like, when I think about trap music, you did have artists such as like Cool Breeze. You had a lot of local artists that a lot of people don't know about, like CMP, Causing Much Pain. It was another group on the east side called Damn Shame. Even Ghetto Mafia, where they did like versions of trap music, but they didn't really get like national attention. And so there's this whole lane of Atlanta storytelling and Atlanta music that's not really being heard on a national level. And I think that he was able to like highlight that with this album. and you saw other artists kind of, you know, do the same thing with whether it's a Gucci Mane or a Jeezy to kind of highlight this trap music in the city. But just for the tone, is definitely something that's from people who had never been to Atlanta, who had never really paid attention to Atlanta. I think it was something that was new for a lot of people. And so, you know, him introducing this type of music to Atlanta was definitely like something that I guess was something that kind of helped to propel the city to what it is today in terms of music.
Man, I'm so glad you pointed out who you pointed out. Because I distinctly remember the feel of some of those rappers. Damn shame I only heard about C.I.P. You just put me on to, but for sure, Ghetto Mafia and Cool Breeze, they were like anomalies at that time. It's like you had to be deep in the mud to get into that or know about them. And even within Dungeon Family, I remember Cool Breeze being in an interview being like, man, I'm only here for this because my crew is the Calhoun crew. And I was like, damn, these sound unappreciative. But that they spoke to a different wave, and I was like, I don't know how much that'll catch on. And then, like you said, this is T.I. His whole rationale. I remember in the 10th anniversary of this album, where they did interviews reflecting on it, he was like, you know, Outkast and Goody Mob already put the flag up for Atlanta, but he's like, there was a whole contingent of street dudes that felt like they didn't have that direct voice.
Oh yeah,
and,
sure.
and I thought that was interesting because I mean, if you really listen to Outkast and Goody Mob, they talk the same stuff that T.I. winds up talking about, but I think because T.I. was just so much more obvious and blatant about it, right? This wasn't Black Ice. This was more like Dirty South. Like if every song on Goody Mob's album was like Dirty South, then it'd be a different story. But sure. I think that's what T.I. meant. He's like, I'm gonna make a blatant song called Heavy Chevys, Dope Boys in the Trap. Look what I got, 20 foes, right? And it was smart of him to carve out that lane. And they said this is how he was rapping originally before, you said the L.A. Reid effect, right? And so once they saw this is what people wanted with the In the Streets mixtapes and everything, it's a mix of being like a revenge album, give the people more what they want, being back more myself. Let me reintroduce you. And I think it was also interesting because he said it was everything you just said. This is it. This is my last shot, or I'm going back to the streets. I don't know if this is for me, if it don't pop, because I'm giving it my all. And when we think about that first album, it didn't seem contrived. He was doing all the elements that you see him do on this album, just less focused, I think. I think he was just happy to have the deal. And he's like, okay, here, we're going to do this song with Too Short. We're going to do this. We got 2 Neptunes tracks. We're going to do it, right? When I listen to I'm Serious, and I hate comparing albums because we only talking about this, but when I listen to I'm Serious, the overall thing I hear is eagerness. I hear him so eager. I remember when the single came out, and he was just rapping so fast and putting so many lines. To beat me, you need a track with Jesus and Jay-Z. Like, he just sounds so animated. Yeah. Just happy to be making a name. And I remember the reviews saying, who is this dude calling himself King of the South? He's calling himself King of the South on that album. Yeah. And so this album was more backing that up, right? And I think it's everything you said, and that's the mood you get from it. And you've been saying it's a more street album with commercial sensibilities, where I think I'm Serious was a commercial album with street sensibilities. Sure. Right? But they did that. And so on a scale from 1 to 5, what would you give this album for how well they pulled off what they wanted to get across?
Man, it's 5. Like it was something unique to the nation at that point. Like I see, when in Atlanta, it wasn't really unique because we had heard artists do similar things. But from a national standpoint, I don't think the average person outside of 285 really, could say that they heard something like this before, unless they were really like into like Southern hip hop. Like you really had to be like,
That's what makes T.I. so special, because you can tell that stuff mattered to him. He didn't really want the approval like that. He just wanted to kind of prove that he was just that ambidextrous. Like, yo, and I think, again, that's what I hear on I'm Serious. I'm Serious. He's like, I can spit.
Yeah.
And then he kind of toned.
in the sense, the South and Atlanta, you know, we were looking for acceptance, because I think we felt like it's almost like that little brother syndrome. It's like, man, I know I can beat my little, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, we can take it in basketball. It's like Jordan versus the Pistons in like '87. Like, it's like, you know, look, he was little brother at that point, but it's like, you notice you got the talent and the skill to like really operate on this level, but you feel like you're not really getting the attention or the just due. So I think you hear that in T.I, and I'm serious, like, yo, like look at me. He's basically saying, yo, look at me. And in the attempt of saying like look at me is almost like he's kind of like losing himself, or not really representing himself. Versus with trap music is like this is him. Like he's although he's rapping over beats that could go on the East Coast or the West Coast, it's like he's really giving you Atlanta. And I think that's when you see him really take off, is when he actually becomes himself, and he's actually comfortable with himself.
Yeah, so he's still doing the same things, but way more comfortable. Yeah. And so that mattered, right? So you say you're giving this a 5?
Yeah, I give it a 5. Yeah.
All right, so that takes us to dimension 4, the song distinction versus the repetition factor. So how redundant does the album get? We already talked about the beats being very diverse, which by default makes the songs pretty diverse. But when we think about, are there any tracks on here where you're like, this beat sounds like that beat? You can tell that there's a feel to this album, right? And so I won't give it a strike because it's like it's taking you to a place, and it's not because of laziness. Right. You know, there's some artists who will be repetitive because they're just lazy, or they just don't really have the talent to create more. This is more like a theme of what it's gonna sound, of what this represents in this moment. He goes away from like any type of repetitiveness because of him being able to like switch up the flow, and make it more so coincide with the beat. When I think about actual word repetition, I don't hear a lot of that either. You know, you put it beautifully. This is a point I make every episode about the difference between intentional repetition, where you're branding something, you're trying to drill something into the ears of listeners, like PSC, right? Atlanta, zone this, zone that, or trap, the word trap. You're gonna hear that because he's trying to intentionally get you to associate that with him, get familiar with it, it's on your radar, as opposed to, I'm just saying these same lines because I ran out of things to say. Yeah, I don't think you get any of that here, because he's a person that's using his words with intention. So on a scale from 1 to 5, what would you give the song distinction and redundancy factor? If 5 means wasn't redundant at all, 1 means it was very redundant.
I'm gonna give it a 4.5, only because it's like, because we're looking back, you know what I'm saying, we have the luxury of saying that he got better, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, at that moment, it was good for that moment, but we saw him actually do it, you know, raise the bar a little bit in this particular category. So I won't say that it's perfect, but he's near that mark. And later on in his career, he gets there. Yeah. But I don't think it's like it's not there yet, but it's almost there.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, that takes us to dimension 5. The amount of content versus the amount of songs. So it's a 16-track album, and this dimension is all about ratios. Is this an album where you feel like there's a fair balance of content, topical stuff?
It is. I think it is. I think it's variation. So it's like, you know, on I Can't Quit is an aggressive flow, very aggressive. And then he comes back with BEs, and it's like he's almost like he's having a conversation, like, in the vid and the gang. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like he's just having a conversation, just kicking it on the street, on the corner, like, you know, he's talking to his homeboys, his partners on the corner. Like I said, with doing my job, it's almost like he's writing a letter, like almost like he's reading some type of letter to like the older homeowners or people who are in his neighborhood. It's like, yo, I'm doing my job, you know.
Yeah, like he slid it under their door or something.
Yeah, like he slid it under the door. And it's like, well, Let's Get Away. It's like he talking right to the women, like, you know, he's spitting game to the women, like, yo, this is how you spit game, you know, like, right. And then 24s is like, yo, this is just like, you with your crew, you with your homies. Some songs you could say that he's sensationalized violence and drug dealing, but at the same time, it's like I think he's still telling a story with it. He's still giving you. I think what's missing now is like in a lot of artists and a lot of rappers, like the ability to self-reflect, right? And almost like knowing that what you're doing is like detrimental. And even be better than me. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I think I don't know if it was like that in New York, but you know, in the South, there was always this saying like, yeah, shout to be, you know, don't be like me, be better than me. And so that was just something that, you know, you would hear like, you know, older cats would say in the hood, they were like, yeah, don't be like me, be better than me. And so he basically just took that phrase and made a song to, you know, talking to that next generation. Like, yeah, I done gave you this trap, but like, don't be like me. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, do something else.
No one ever talks about how this album, and you said this is like, this is more like his first album than anything. And there's only few, every now and then, there's only a few in hip hop history who get the chance to like redo their introduction. I think Tupac the same way. Like Tupacalypse Now is not something that people talk about as an album. They talk about the songs from it, but it wasn't hitting like that. He didn't become like a radio sensation till the second album. It was like, this allowed me to reintroduce myself. Now y'all know me from the movies and from my previous album, but this is like my introduction. This is what this was, but I always thought it was really clever, and nobody talks about how this is really like a sequel, because he paralleled so many songs on this album to the first album. Like Let's Get Away is just a sequel to the What's Your Name, and I Still Love You is just like a sequel to Still Ain't Forgave Myself, right? Long Live the Game is almost like a sequel to What Happened, where he like goes to hell and he battles the devil. It's like they're not necessarily sequels, but they're analogs, they're parallels, right? So he has so many. And then on Let Me Tell You Son, in the beginning of the song, he's like, I know you confused. First I tell you I can't be your man, now I want to be your man, which is again, you know, nod to his first album song, I Can't Be Your Man. So there's so many of those setups. And again, this has everything to do with how much T.I. cared about having the respect of all the markets, everybody could possibly get. So he, as opposed to other Southern albums or other rap, just rap, this is a problem in rap in general, like you said. Rappers don't think, how can I show all these different sides, touch all these different angles while keeping in the theme? He doesn't have like one random political song that's an outlier on this album. They all go. You would think a song like Be Better Than Me is like a preachy song, but it doesn't. It still fits because he still talk about the trap in a way where someone might actually listen to it. They wouldn't, you know, be like, here you go with this preaching, this soft song. It's like, no, he's like, look, this is how you're going to have to do it if you want to do it. Take a quarter key, do it, you know? So I'm like, and then at the end, even when he's talking, it reminds me when Trick Daddy came to Howard Homecoming. Shout out to Trick. Trick was cursing us out, man. He was like, y'all keep y'all mother in school, you know. that's Tip. Tip was like, hey man, he like, hey, you gonna die here if you gonna get. Ain't no money in the drug game anyway. They gonna lock your ass up. Your hair be as long as Methuselah. So.
Pac having that same message, and it was like he is a clip. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see this Dear Mama documentary about Tupac yet, but there's okay. So on the second episode, when he's at the I think he's at the Black Expo in Indianapolis.
Oh man, when he goes off, where they tell him don't curse,
he's like, yeah, I can't. You know what I'm saying? But it's like he wants to reach a certain demo, and he knows that he can only do this by speaking the way he speaks. He has to speak in a manner where, you know, the average street cat, you got to speak in their language to really actually touch them. And so you hear Pac doing that same thing, you know, in that speech at the Black Expo. And T.I. does something similar with this album and Be Better Than Me, where it's like, you know, like I said, not preachy, but almost speaking to that person in the street, kind of like a, you know, even though dog whistles are kind of used in a negative connotation, it's all, but it's to this point, it's almost used in a manner where it's like, how did you get the average dude on the corner who don't really feel like he got hope? Who you know, how did you touch them? How do you touch a nerve? And so this is how you touch that nerve. You got to speak in this way to kind of like get them to like pay attention, to like actually like listen and hear what you're trying to say.
Yeah, my favorite part of that song is when he says, "Look, ain't no money in this anyway. All the money done been dried up." So it's like he's giving you this album. It reminds me of what Jay-Z does or what he did on American Gangster. He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna tell you about all my exploits, but I'm also gonna tell you it might be a little late for you, son. Like, there's something better you could do. This is the heyday. This is not now." Right? I thought that was really. If I didn't listen to any other part of that and I was in them streets, that part might ring out to me. I'd be like, oh, that might be point. Because everybody always thinks they can do it better than who came before. But on a scale from 1 to 5, what you giving this album for how well it balanced all of those things?
I give it a 4. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5. I give it a 4.5 because I think it does. He does it in a good way. But like I said, I think he did it better later on. But I think he did a good job of kind of like having variations of like different levels of content and just showing different parts of who he is as a person.
Absolutely.
Because we're not really like the same every day. You know, some days you wanna like kick it on the corner with your boy. Some then you want to like kick it with your lady, like. And so I think he did give like good variations of like, how you may feel on different days. And so I give it a 4.5.
Gotcha. Dimension 6, the features. Who we got on this album?
Man, it's really like it's not that many features. I know you got 8-Ball MJG, Bun B, Jazzy Faye.
You got Mac Boney from PSD.
Yeah,
that's the only Pimp Squad clique member that's rapping on the album. You said Jazzy Faye,
and Jazzy Faye does a hook singing. So I don't know.
I knew this before, but I forgot this. Apparently, Tiny is singing the backgrounds on King of the South.
Yeah. Okay.
She's not credited. I think that's T.I. like you ain't singing no more.
Yeah. He got the hook up on that one, so she didn't get no credit. So, but I think with him getting 8-Ball MJG and Bun B was really just an odd to like the Southern hip hop artists who came before him who didn't really get that national praise that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, apparently that's their first time on the track together, UGK and 8-Ball and MJG. So I'm like, oh, what? No. Actually, they were on the track. Master P did a song for the Unbounded soundtrack, and it's called "Trying to Get a Meal Ticket." It both
featured
of them together.
It was Master P, 8-Ball MJG, and UGK. So y'all check that out. "Trying to Get a Meal Ticket" from the Unbounded soundtrack. I think it came out in either 96 or 97.
97, yep.
Yeah, so that was like so that's a song with 8-Ball MJG and UGK.
Nice. And that had both members of UGK on it?
Yeah. I'm thinking so because I remember I used to know the song by heart, like got an MJ.
Yeah. Now I heard conflicting things about T.I.'s relationship with Pimp. I think back in the I'm Serious days, they said Pimp kind of waved it off and was like, I ain't got time to work with no new guy. But then later on, they got cool and they got a relationship.
Yeah.
But I think Pimp was locked up when this song was made, which is why you hear Bun B at the end say, free to Pimp. Another intentional sequence moment, I think he puts that song right before King of the South. Because he's like, look, again, if the OGs ain't got a problem with me saying it, then I don't care about what anybody else has to say. So, those are the only rap features. And, I got to give props. That's not an easy feat to pull off a 16-song album as somebody who has to kind of reprove themselves and reintroduce themselves to the market to say, I got this. It's just one dude for my crew and, 2 sets of legends on the album. And that's all. He could have easily grabbed, like you said, the first album, he had Beanie Man, he had Too Short. He was going for it. He had Bone Crusher and Young Bloods on the remix. He didn't have any of that. To not have a lot of features and still have these like big hits, hats off. While I think Bezel was not a song that was needed on the album, it feels such a necessary piece of what T.I. stood for and what he represented, and Southern solidarity, which is something that other markets always suffer with. Like once y'all did get on the map, the East and West were looking at y'all like, damn, why can't we be like them? Atlanta cats were always in each other's videos. So yeah, very interesting. What do you get the features on a scale from 1 to 5 on this album?
Because it's only like really, you got Mac Boney and Jazzy Faye and they bought MJG and Bun. I'm gonna give it a 4, but I think like I said, T.I. was very intentional and like really standing on his own too, and showing that he can stand on his own too. And then it was really something that wasn't really normal at that time in hip hop. Everybody wanted to get a million features to say, this is, we got so and so on this album featuring da 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 da. I remember when they would promote albums based on like the feature. And it would be like, who was featured on this album? Yeah. And so he kind of went away from like that. You see what J. Cole is doing now, where it's like he doing albums where it's like no one, and he's just like doing an entire album by himself. Mm-hmm. And so for T.I. to do that at that point in hip hop was definitely bold. I'm sure he saved a lot of money.
Yeah, you're right.
Features.
Yeah, that money go right back to Grand Hustle. Yep, you're right. Yep. Great point. And since we on that, we jump right into Dimension 7. Question of, does the weakest song or do the weakest songs bring the album down? And so I say this about every album, no matter how great the album is, you'll find yourself probably skipping one. Even on Thriller or Illmatic are usually like the measure of what people consider like 2 top albums in their fields. And you're still probably gonna skip something, right? But it doesn't mean that it's whack. Now, is there a song that you skip because it actually brings the value of the album down a little bit for you?
I don't know if there's anything that brings the value down. There's songs that worth being ignored. Only one that I would say is probably like King of the South, because it's like, yeah, it's like, even though I know that's bold, but it's like, for me, it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a song that probably could have went on I'm Serious, and it's just like I feel like this has a potential. I don't know. The flow on trap music is like it's very, I don't know. It seems like it's very intentional, right? So I don't know. I don't necessarily, just I guess from a personal standpoint, see myself. I don't know. I guess I didn't really like embrace that song, even though it was a statement. I think it was a powerful statement at that time, and I think it was an Easter egg to have, 8Ball and MJG and UG and Bun B on there before that song, to kind of give people a little history of who those artists were, what they represented for the South. Right. But yeah, I don't know. I just even though it was it was a statement, it was just like, I don't know. I thought it was a lot. I think there was several other songs that hit home runs versus that one. I think that was like, it was like a base hit. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you got the base. Like,
that's a great comparison. Yeah.
Like, but Rubber Bands, man, is a home run. It's like a grand slam. It's like, like 24s. It's like a home run. It's like, it's like King of the South. It's like, it's cool, but it's like,
it's slow.
Like that. Like, so when you think about Southern music, and I'm not sure how particular it is in New York, because in New York, a lot of people ride the train. But in the South, we were known for like dudes getting these old school cars and putting the bass in the trunk, and like what are you gonna hear people bumping in their car? And that was like the biggest thing. Like, what songs are people bumping? They're not bumping King of the South. They bumping 24s. They bumping Rubber Band Man. They bumping Be Easy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm just thinking about like how King of the South compares to those other songs. If we were to say, okay, if there was one song that said that you could say, all right, it's okay, but not really like in the vein of everything else.
At the back in this time of this album's out, I think I used to end my listening after T.I. versus T.I.P. I was like, I'm good with these other 3 songs.
Yeah.
King of the South grew on me slowly over the years. It's one of my favorite songs. So it's so ironic that it's not, but I understand for all the reasons. It's probably the slowest song on the album, kind of has a draggy feel to it, right? If you're not in that kind of mellow mode, it's like the beat is mellow and he's hyped, right? He's yeah, but the beat is this bluesy backdrop. But to me, and I always cheat a little when I have guests, because by myself I never throw my opinion in there like that. Bezel's actually the weakest song to me. I was pretty disappointed with everybody except for Bun. Bun is spitting, but it almost seems like T.I. gave them a theme and they kind of stuck to it, and Bun delivered his verse separately, and this was more like a spitting braggadocio verse. They were all kind of talking about pimping, and I thought that was a deviation from everything else on the album. I know that's what MJG and 8-Ball talk about a lot. So it's right up their alley, right? And MJG's going in real hard. I'll break a hope, saying his name 40 times. This man always has to break his name. MJG, right? But T.I., I mean, his verse was just raunchy and just for no reason. It was just kind of filler, right? And even the hook, Toomp said they sampled it from a T.I. song that didn't make it on the first album. I was like, saw the drop top, like the bezel on my watch, and I'm trying to remember, I'm like, how did those two connect? I'm like, was this the era where they started making those watches, those Jacob watches where the bezel came off?
Yeah, like this is the bling bling era.
Because I'm like, a drop top is a convertible car, like it comes out, but I'm like, I think this is when those Jacob watches where you can flip the bezel up with. So I'm like, it was filler. It was like, the feature itself was important, but what they did on the feature, it was like, this could have been anybody. This could have been PSC on this song, right? Long Live the Game is probably the only song that really, really is. Long Live the Game would be better than me, reminiscent of the first album, flow-wise, because he's rapping probably the most sloppy and super fast, and he's kind of not as honed and reined in as he is on all the other songs. And so I think Long Live the Game, he's attempting to tell a story, but it feels kind of rushed. It doesn't take you through a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's just a beginning and an end. And I think he thought he was going to be impressive by like, let me tell you a story about my last day on Earth, pimp. But it just didn't hit. And he's trying, because you hear, and we'll talk, I'll talk about this in category 2. I talk about the flow. He's doing this thing where he flows slow and then he speeds up, and he flows slow and he speeds, but it makes the story sound a little like. It took a couple listens for me to realize it's a story. I'm like, oh, and then all of a sudden he just shot in the head, and that's the end of the album. So those are the 2 weak joints for me, and I wanted to also shine on Jazzy Faye. So you're gonna remember this. I don't know if anybody born past a certain point is gonna remember the original version of Let's Get Away. Jazzy Faye was singing totally different, and I remember the people who heard this album being split on if they like the singing, because he was doing this, hey, let's get away. And he said he did that because the label made him switch it, because what they were doing, they didn't get the clearance for the Daydreaming, the Aretha Franklin Daydreaming hook. And they said by the time the video came out, they just got the clearance and they put it back to the, hey, let's get away. And I remember being one of the few people that liked the, hey, let's get away. Do you remember that? Did they play the original version on the radio?
I don't know if they played it on the radio, but I remember it. But I just don't know. I don't know if it made it to radio. Right. But yeah, I remember that there was like this. It was a distinction in the way he presented. Jazzy Faye presented it. Yeah. But yeah, I don't remember if it was on the radio.
For this, the weakest song, I agree with you. I don't think any of these, no matter what critique I'm giving it, I don't think they take away from the album.
Even though Bezel from a content standpoint was very like subpar, I remember people bumping that song. Like just because it was 8-Ball and MJG, like people were bumping that song, man, like hearing it in a car. And it's like big ass speakers. It's like, 15s. It just sounds different. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like a song that you're listening to on the headphones will sound totally different when you like hear it in a car.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And it's just another experience. So it's like, although Bezel was like, from a lyrical standpoint, like Bezel is very like one of 8Ball and MJG's worst moments, and they have like great moments throughout history. It's like very like it's very lazy.
Yeah.
But from a beat standpoint, like I think people will ride into it. It being a tune beat. It's like you hear it. If you hear it, I want you to try it. Just like play it loud. You know what I'm saying? Don't think about the lyrics. Don't even think about the content, but just play it. And how does it, so how does it feel versus what they're actually talking about?
I can dig that. I can definitely dig that. And I remember T.I.P said this is the last song that they made for the album. The album's finished, and they were like, got one more. Listen to the beat. And I'm thinking about, we overlooked that factor, that Southern factor. That's all I heard throughout the 90s and early 2000s. How does it knock? The knock is so important. What you giving this on a scale from 1 to 5 for the weakest song? 5 means it had no effect at all. 1 means it brought it down all the way.
I would give it a 3.5, because I think
King of the South.
Yeah, like King of the South. Like I just said, I had to look at it from what it meant to the South back then, and I didn't really hear people like bumping that song like back then. And there was so many other songs that that people were actually like gravitated towards. I give it a 3.5. I don't think the weakest songs necessarily make it a bad album. I just think that it's probably an album that could have been maybe 12 songs. And if it was like 12 songs, and it's like you probably thinking about one of the best hip hop albums ever made. You know what I'm saying? Like
the standard is usually, if you go past 12, there's usually a forgettable song in that mix. So great point. That takes us to dimension 8, mass appeal. This is what we were just talking about. How much of a reach was this album destined to have? No matter how it performed, because we know it's a platinum album, and it had 4 singles. Did it, from just listening to it, can you tell that they knew that they were trying to hit markets and different people? They had stuff for everybody.
I think he was less. I think he knew what he was doing. He was definitely intentional with some of the songs, but I don't think he was forcing it like he did on I'm Serious. I think with this time, he was more comfortable in making songs that very Southern, but it could actually play in New York. You know what I'm saying? Like you can play this in New York radio and or LA radio.
Yeah.
And not like skip it. Like they won't like, like if New York is here, like let's get away. They're not gonna be like, yo, what the hell is this, son? You know what I'm saying? They're not gonna like turn this. They're not gonna be like, turn this trash off. It's something you can vibe to. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think he knew that if he could create those type of songs where it's like, even though he's someone from the South that people will pay attention. I think he knew that it could resonate from a wide, more marketable standpoint. And so I give this like from a marketable standpoint, I give it a 5 because particularly in that time in hip hop, when it came to that type of music, like street music in Atlanta, I think he did a good job of like making an album that anybody could play from any city.
And he stood out in the time. This was a new wave of Atlanta rappers, because I'm thinking you had Jim Crow had just come out, Youngbloods just came out, but they just weren't hitting the same way. And he picked up a momentum, and it's like each single did something different, right? So 20 Flows, perfect timing, man. We talking about coming right off the heels of Never Scared by Bone Crusher, right? This was T.I.'s comeback, actually. That single came out before 24's was released, right? And I remember the girls telling me about T.I. Again, the girls in the dorm, they love that. I'm a bankhead nigga, I take your cookies, right? I'm like, I seen this dude before, but he looked different, right? He wasn't looking in the way he did in the I'm Serious video. So then 24's comes out. It's an undeniable anthem. And because the markets have changed so much, New York is more receptive. We had been primed by the No Limit wave, by the Cash Money wave. So now our ears are in tune. Ludacris wave, right? We're attuned to this sound. It's not so foreign to us. So the New Yorkers are partying the 24's. just as much. Maybe not just as much, but they're at least receptive to it, right? It's playing in the up north parties. I don't know how far west it reached, but then Be Easy, which Jason Jeter's manager said was the label Atlantic's decision. They thought that was a good follow-up, which always to me seemed like a mild song. I'm like, where is this supposed to go? This is when labels still didn't know what to do. Like, I don't know how much radio play Be Easy got in Atlanta. You could tell me, but for the non-Atlanta audience, I think that strategically impacted how much appeal this album was gonna have, because dudes like me tuned in because the video was creative, and you could hear what he's spitting so clearly, and you could tell, oh, he's not doing the norm. He's not sounding like Yin Yang Twins. It's not a bunch of crazy things buried in a southern drawl. He's doing that enunciation thing. He's being clever. He's being witty. He's being charismatic. He's like, so what? It's fame to me. I've got a new lane to me. It's like, oh, this dude is cool. So I think that's the effect it had, where it didn't move a lot on the Billboard. It hit another audience, either intentionally or unintentionally. But was that getting radio play, that song?
Yeah, Be Easy. I mean, see, I think so when you talk about that time in Atlanta, it's like we have now B103 is playing all, like, it's hip hop now. So it's like in the early 90s, late 80s, like B103, which was the only urban station at the time, they wouldn't play any hip hop. So once Radio 1 comes and they build a hip hop station, then B103 they go real hard with hip hop, and they hire Greg Street, and it's like, they like, okay, we're gonna go into this market and like really like be, go all hip hop pretty much. And so you would hear Be Easy on the radio. You didn't really hear it in the clubs because it's not really like a song you want to hear in the club,
right?
Particularly in the South during that time. But it's a song that you could hear on the radio, and you could play it. You can play it in the morning. Yeah, you can play it on the morning drive radio, where it's like, it's kind of relaxing, but it's still like, it still got that like swag and like that dope boy appeal to it, that Atlanta feel to it, and it's just, it's just like a cool song. I don't know. It wasn't a home run from a national standpoint. Like it was a cool song.
Yeah. But that video, where radio doesn't hit, the video lives on depending on how creative it is. So 24's straightforward video. He's riding around, like you said, it's a hanging out song. But Be Easy's walking backwards. He's playing a piano in the middle of the hood. It caught attention for those of us who grew up watching Rap City and 106 in Park. Like, it's like, okay, who is this dude? I'm seeing this dude a lot. I've seen him in the Bone Crusher, heard the 24s. I see this. Oh, he can really spit. He's just not making another Southern chanty song. So now the stage is set for Rubber Band Man, which combines both of those elements. It's Southern, it's chanty, it's bouncy, but he's still spitting on that. It's a little bit more complex than 24s. And then it's co-signed by David Banner, who at that time had a couple hits under his belt. So you're like, oh, people rocking with him. Then we talk video again, it's co-signed just by Diddy's presence being there.
Yeah. So Rubber Band Man is like, so I'm gonna talk about different elements of Rubber Band Man. So with David Banner's beat, he incorporates like it's like these child voices, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's something about hearing a child's voice that makes you pay attention. I don't know if it's just like you have like you just, I don't know, it's just like when you hear a child's voice, you pay attention, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's the kids doing la 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 la, right? And so it's like, it has that like that appeal to it, and then it's like, David Banner, he dropped some 808s on there that and Tip is spitting on. It's like, it's an anthem, and it feels like a big song, right? It feels like a song that you can play at stadiums. You know what I'm saying? Like not only play in your car, but you can play it at a stadium, and the whole crowd is going to like rock out to it. And then like with the video, he brings in Diddy. At the time he got Michael Vick in there. You gotta understand, like Michael Vick is like the biggest athlete in Atlanta since Dominique. So it's like, this is before like the dog fighting and all that situation that happened with Vic. And like Vic is just like you gotta understand, like Vic was everything to Atlanta at that point. And then you got Michael Vick in T.I.'s video with Diddy, and he's like on the porch. It's like like the perfect storm, man. It's like you couldn't really craft a moment, and I think that was like the pinnacle of what that album represents, because it's like, it got the Dope Boy lyrics, it got like a crazy like a big beat, like a big instrumentation behind it, and then the video just shows you, okay, Diddy rocking with him, he got Michael Vick with him, what I'm saying, he got of course the young ladies, that's just normal as far as like hip hop, but it's like, I think it kind of made you pay attention at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like it was something that kind of that made you like, oh dang, like who is this dude? Like if you didn't know before, it's like, okay, all right, so this dude is the Rubber Band Man, okay? Right. So it's like, and it's easy, it's catchy, and it's easy to remember as well.
Absolutely. You dissected all the key elements. I couldn't have said it better, man. There's something about, and I think I've heard The Dream talk about this, he calls them the dumb parts of the songs, but something about the rhythmic consequence of na-na-nas or la-la-las. And Kanye's tested that out. I think he's used la-la-la every way you could possibly use it. He's done. So the children voices, another similarity with the Jeezy My Hood. He's got actual kids singing the words on his, so another parallel with those two. But all those formula, the perfect recipe elements and ingredients for a commercial hit, and the anthem, that's the key word. If 24 was like a crunk anthem, this was just kind of a multiple market anthem. It didn't sound like it had a home. It didn't sound super Southern, but it had a bounce. It was infectious. And then, I read somewhere that this was the beginning. This is one of the earliest moments of Diddy popping up in an artist video that wasn't Bad Boy related. And I thought that was big because you started seeing him do that later on more in the 2000s. He's just like, I like this. And we know Diddy's famous for just kind of flocking to whatever's popular, whatever's hot. Jay-Z does that too. But it worked here because unlike what Diddy would do with his artists, because Loon came out the same year and he had the How You Like That video. And even though they kind of seemed like brothers, they were kind of on the same tier in that he introduces him. He still kind of has that son element. He's like, all right, you up next, boy. It's your turn, Lou. He doesn't do that with T.I. They matching, he's got his mink, he's got his mink. They look like equals. And what it does, it kind of cements all the hype and the legend. You're like, oh, I guess everything about this T.I.P kid is true. He's the hottest thing going right now. It must be. Those visual confirmations, they mean so much more than any article. So that was the turning point. That's what brought this album to platinum status. And then you didn't really even need the quintessential singles for the ladies, but you rounded out with that. And I was really, really, on a personal note, I'm really glad that Let Me Tell You Something exists, because T.I. does what we talk about a lot on this channel. On Let's Get Away, you would think it's a song for the ladies, but he's talking crazy in those verses in ways that I think if women just read the lyrics, they'd be like, oh, he's saying some crazy stuff. And it's not really game to the women. It's more kind of like talking to us, the male audience, like, hey, this is how I get them. This is how I do them. Where Let Me Tell You Something is talking to the woman. How about we get away to Montego Bay? Would you like that? But, the formula, the way hip hop works is the sound of it. If it sounds away, that's what it is. And that's what happens with Let's Get Away. It's like, oh, this sounds like the song for the women. It's really just a song about women.
About women,
T.I., I had read that he had made a conscious effort. Like he kind of decided early that he knew what his lane was not, right? And he's like, he appreciates the booty shake music and the real like club bass music, but he said he knew he couldn't make that. He said that wasn't for him. No, you remember this era. This is when we saw people who had no business trying to make crunk songs, making crunk songs. And so 24 is probably the closest we going to veer into that territory. And what was interesting about that, T.I.P said he built that around T.I.'s hook, because T.I. had been saving that hook after the I'm Serious album, because they said you need more simplified stuff, and so he had been running around kind of chanting that, and you can hear it when you like really listen to the arrangement. I'm like, oh, those synths are building, and then Toot just adds a bunch of layers. So on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, you said you're giving this a 5.
Yeah. For Mass Appeal.
Yeah. So let's jump to Dimension 9. Dimension 9, everybody's favorite, the 3 I's: impact, innovation, influence. I did want to use this time to speak to something that I might be reaching, and you can tell me because you were on the scene, you were in Atlanta. This is 2003. Ludacris's album drops October of 2003, 2 months after. So I really don't know if Luda had enough time to hear this and take Snipes back. But everybody credits the beef to starting when they were both on the Young Buck song Stomp. But word from people on the inside is that this beef predated that. It dated back when Luda was on the radio as Chris Lover Lover, and I saw an interview where I-20 said the beef really started from him and T.I. not liking each other and getting into it. So on the first track on this album, on Trap Music, first half of it, one of his first lines, he's like, "So all you rap niggas roll out." And I thought, that can't just be a coincidence. I hate to be one of those dudes that reaches for beef when it's not, but the way he says it, T.I. being a very intentional person, he'd say, "Rap niggas roll out." He was like, "Oh, you rap niggas roll out." Yeah. And then I remember on Ludacris's album, the first song, he's got the dude in between the verses talking very similar to T.I. It sounded like a hater. And he's like, "Hey man, I'm in these streets. I don't know why Luda getting all the credit. I got this, I got trapped something." And so were those little like precursors to the beef?
Yeah, they were taking jabs at each other. Yeah, everybody in Atlanta, we knew that they were taking jabs at each other. They were, I think it was kind of like it's almost like McGrady and Kobe, came up at the same time. It's like, all right, who's gonna be that next dude that's gonna like actually be the man? Like, if we talking about basketball, like Kobe and McGrady came right after Jordan pretty much retired. And so it's like, who's gonna be like this next guy who got all these skills that can do everything on the court? So you saw that, Luda was getting a lot of airplay. You know what I'm saying? He was, Luda was actually getting more radio play than T.I. Yeah. Because Luda just had, Luda just knew, because Luda coming from radio, he actually knew how to craft a good radio song and what they were going to play. So it's like, yeah, they were taking shots at each other early on in their career. Of course, they're cool now.
So yeah, naturally, if you're in the know, that beef is going to kind of contribute to the "let me hear what this album is about" factor. But when it dropped, you being the author of the book Trap History, what can you speak to the impact of this album?
Man, it kind of like, it was kind of like changing the course, right? Because I think that the thing about what was happening in Atlanta, it was like, all right, people were actually starting to pay attention to what Atlanta rap music was about. And so when everybody was like, thought that Crunk was just going to be like this thing that was just going to be representing of Atlanta, you gotta understand, like, Crunk was big, like Lil Jon was on Dave Chappelle's show, and it's like, you know what I'm saying, like from a national standpoint, people are thinking that Crunk is really going to be the representative, just going to represent Atlanta in terms of sound. But then T.I. comes out, and it's like, with trap music, it's like, man, this is something different, but it's almost like I say, telling a different story, a different aspect of Atlanta culture. And so, man, I think, it was a perfect storm, because right after, of course, trap music drops first. Then, the rise of Gucci and Jeezy come around at the same time. Jeezy drops, Jeezy drops 2 mixtapes. He drops The Streets Is Watching, and he drops The Trap or Die. Yeah. And so, and then Gucci comes, and it's like, man, it's like, it wasn't even really called a genre then, but it was just like, all right, these dudes are making a different type of music that has a specific sound that's kind of different from anything that's been put out before. Or I would say, like, they're taking it to another level, because I said it was artists before them that was making like if you get a chance, YouTube CMP Causing Much Pain.
Gotcha.
They had a song called Diablos, and that's trap music before trap music. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? You listen to a Damn Shame, like these are trap music songs before trap music was even called trap music. So I think from an impact standpoint, it basically opened up an entire genre of music that hadn't been present, hadn't gotten the attention before, and it put it on a national scale. So I think the impact is definitely a 5.
Yeah, I think if we throw that into we can kind of bleed that into the innovation conversation too, because I think, like you said, this music kind of always existed throughout the 90s in Atlanta. It just wasn't made where it had catchiness to it and to be the dominant soundscape. And I remember, Atlanta going from in the 90s being soul based, right? You had tracks, but Atlanta was way bigger on musical. Organized Noise, Dallas Austin, and Jermaine Dupri's camp had a grip on the sound, and they are musicians themselves, so they pride themselves on live instrumentation, guitars and everything, beautiful melodic sounds. And then we get Lil Jon with the crunk, and what this does is bring kind of a darkness to hip hop. I'm thinking about all those beats on that Jeezy rapped over it. It's dark, it's big. Deep horns that announce themselves, right? Trap or Die with Bun B. That it comes on like menacing. Brr, brr, brr. Like this is the beginning of those kind of sounds being at the forefront, rather than how funky is this guitar, or how snappy is this beat, or how synthy is this. No whistles in the beats like that. So yeah, I think innovation on the production side and being able to make that radio friendly. 24's is genius for being able to take a beat that would probably be an album track and make it catchy like it was Rubber Band Man, right?
Yeah.
Also, innovation, not something we saw with Jeezy and Gucci. I still think T.I. represents the second generation of lyrical rappers from Atlanta. Like Luda had already let people know, yes, you can rep the South and care about bars. It's not just CeeLo and Gibb and Dre and Big Boy who care about bars. There's other rappers out here to do. So he was keeping that alive too. He's like, I'm gonna rap the same content, but I'm still gonna spit it. Now influence. What can we say about the influence of this album to this day?
Oh no, influence is big, man. I mean, the fact that it's like, and I always say this, I say this in my book, is that the thing that that kind of makes trap music as an album and a genre stand out is like the longevity. Because crunk music was probably around, I would say around 97, 98 was like when Lil Jon began to like craft this sound. So it's like 97. So I'm saying from like 97 until probably like 2004, maybe 2005, that crunk had its run. Not quite 10 years.
Yeah.
Possibly close to 10 years. Because I know when E40 did the Snap Your Fingers, but that was kind of a mixture of Snap and crunk.
Yeah.
That Snap Your Fingers and Do Your Step.
Yeah, Snap had like a 2-year run.
Snap had like a 2-year run, and then it was another subgenre in Atlanta. I don't even know if you remember, but it was called futuristic swag.
Are you talking about with the Yin Yangs, Mr. College Park era?
No. So futuristic swag was, I don't know. Do you remember? It's an artist called Young LA. He was T.I.P. They had some dispute, but futuristic swag was very brief. It was probably like maybe a summer. But yeah, definitely look up futuristic swag, and that was a moment in Atlanta that we had. But trap, man, the fact that trap has lasted, the genre has lasted from, let's say, 2003 until now, and it's like kind of reinvented itself over the years with Young Thug, Migos, and Future. And then like a few years later, you get Lil Baby and Gunna. They doing their own versions of trap music. So it's like it kind of like they were like passing the baton of trap music. It's like it kept kind of reinventing itself. Whereas those other subgenres kind of just died out, and you know, they didn't really have any like new artists that wanted to kind of continue on making that type of music. Whereas with trap music, it was like younger artists wanted to kind of give their own version of what it is and what it means for them.
Right.
So that kind of makes it a little different. So in terms of influence with trap music, the album is I give it a 5. It's like you can't deny it, man. It's definitely like one of the most influential projects in rap history.
Yeah, and he didn't even come out the gate saying he was trying to create a genre. Again, he said he just wanted to give this street voice to the masses. And it lo and behold, now that people are having conversations about, well, who created it? He's like, okay, ahem. And now you have Trap Cafe, you got Trap Music Museum, and it lasts. And I mean, for better or worse, right? Because I can make the same argument that I can make about gangster rap. I don't know if it's a good thing that this is now the dominant music, because I think the reason it lasted more than Crunk and Snap is because it wasn't necessarily attached to a sound. Even though it brought darker beats to the forefront, it wasn't like, this is the sound you have to have trap. It was always more about the image, the content, because what Future did with it is totally different than what, you know, some other rapper who came up in the later era did. But trap being this genre that puts street glorification at the forefront, you know, there's pros and cons to it, right? It gives a bunch of young black men jobs, but we also are hearing a more negative, dominant message. And so I digress. Innovation, you giving that a 5 as well?
I give it like a 4.5. I don't know if it was necessarily like when I think of innovation when it comes to albums, I think trap music stands alone, but I think that being from Atlanta, you can say, okay, sonically, you could probably it can be compared to something, right? Maybe not content wise, but sonically, you can say that, you know, there's another album that's similar to this. I think for most people, when they heard Aquemini, they had never heard an album like that in the history of, like, there's no album that sounds like Aquemini in the history of hip hop. Like,
right. Oh, well, you taking us into the next one, so I might as well jump to the final dimension. Okay. Dimension 10, the overall timelessness and uniqueness of this album.
Man. I think it stands the test of time, but I don't know if it's a great album, right? It's a good album, and it represented an era, and it kicked in and it kicked off an entire genre of music. So I think from that standpoint. But when I'm thinking about like albums that, like, when I say that's just like, man, like albums that really like changed the course of hip hop, I don't know. Like, I think like I said, I'm such a like a, you know, like a music nerd, like a hip hop nerd. It's like I know what Long Live the Kane did for lyricism, and I know what Paid in Full did for lyricism in hip hop and how people rap, right? Like before Kane and Rakim, people weren't really rapping like that, right? And so I think
if you were to throw a number behind it on the scale from 1 to 5, because we know it's a classic. The question is always, how classic is this classic?
Yeah. How classic is this classic, man? Because the thing is, I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong in comparing it to other classics, or should it stand alone in its own place?
Well, I think you might be putting the most deep thought into this than any guest I've ever had, which I love, which is why I have you on here, man. I love having the pros because it's a fair question. It's like, if we're measuring this, if it's already in the pantheon, there's levels to that pantheon, right? Like Zeus is still the king of the gods, but Poseidon is still a god, right? So, no, you're on the right path.
I had to like lean on what Atlanta says, right? So there's a lot of people in Atlanta who like urban legend more than trap music,
which is crazy to me.
I don't know if it's a consensus that's saying that people say this is like the best of what he's put out, even though trap music probably represents the most of what he's done,
right? You personally, if you had to put a number behind it, 5, it's up there with the Illmatics and the other albums you named. Anything less than that, it is what it is.
I'll probably give it like a 4.
I knew you were leaning towards that. I knew we were gonna get caught up, and that was a great discussion, man. Like, I gotta add, we gotta connect a little bit more. But for the sake of this, that concludes our Category 1 review of the classic album, the album that birthed an entire genre, trap music by T.I. My special guest, A.R. Shaw. Before we jump out of here, can you let them know where they can find you and what you got cooking up next?
Yeah, man, you can check me out, IG AR Shaw 23, Twitter AR Shaw, website traphistory.com. Check out the book Trap History. I'm covering Atlanta, covering music, covering pop culture, covering Black culture. So yeah, just follow me, man, and check out my movement, man. I'm definitely always doing something for the culture, something with the culture. So yeah.
And when we talk about movement, the movement is big. You might find this man anywhere. You might be at the finals covering. You might be interviewing your favorite singer. You might be interviewing a politician or delivering the nightly news. This man here, legend in the making. It's been an honor to have you, bro. Like I said, it's like distant family, and we got to chop it up again. Thank you for teaching me a few things. And till next time, y'all know what it is. F for Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.